Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This morning's learning is sponsored by Rochelle Diamond and family in memory of Chaim Diamond, Chaim Ben Arav, Avram Mordechai Zechron Levracha. Should be on the merit first neshama. Thank you to the Diamond family. Chapter 12, verse 26. Very, very famous psukim. We're discussing the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, the offering that we brought Erev Pesach throughout the generations, as long as there was a Beis Hamikdash. And in verse 26, it says, "Va'yak yomru alechem benichem," when your children say to you, "Ma avodo azos lachem," what is this that you're doing? V'amartem, and you should respond, verse 27. Zevach Pesach hu la'Hashem, this is an offering of Pesach to God. Asher pasach al abotev bnei Yisrael Mitzrayim, that he passed over the houses of the Jews in Egypt. B'nag poes Mitzrayim yespoteinu yitzil, when he was bringing a plague upon the Egyptians, but he saved our homes by Koram Vayishtachavu. And in hearing this, the nation bowed to God. Okay, there's a very, very interesting sforno on these psukim. Sforno pasuk chava mo avodo azos lachem. What's meant by this question that the children ask? I mean, it could just be, what are you doing? Why? The word that I hear regularly from my nursery school, a child, why? Maybe that just might be what it is, inquisitive children asking all kinds of questions. Certainly reasonable. And because we have the idea of chinuch, of conveying messages to the children, particularly for Pesach, it's appropriate they should ask. Really interesting sforno, though. Sforno on pasuk chavav, mo avodo azos lachem, she'ena b'yom mikra kodesh kishara karbanos. This is a very strange offering. It's not being brought on a holiday. All the other special calendar korbanos are brought on holy days. Erev Pesach is not a holiday. V'lo toch zman shar korbanos, shu mitamid shel shachar ad tamid shel bein rabayim. The time frame for this korban is not the normal time frame. The time frame for a korban, for a korban other than the regular schedule, is normally any time in between the morning daily offering and the afternoon daily offering. This korban specifically has to be brought in the afternoon. Why? You will not find another. The only time you have personal obligations of korbanos is if a person had a unique experience in their life, or a person sinned in some way that obligates a korban, or a person wanted to pledge and donate a korban. This is an obligation, and it's an obligation upon everyone. Guess what? If it's an obligation upon everyone, let it just be one communal offering like all the other korbanos. We don't all show up at the Beis Hamikdash to bring the daily Tamid offering, or the Shabbos offering, or the Rosh Chodesh offering. Why does everyone have to show up for the korban for Pesach? So 3 great questions. Why is the korban Pesach brought when it's on a day that's not a holiday? Why is the time frame for the korban Pesach different than other personal korbanos? And why is this a personal korban anyway? Let there be one korban Pesach brought on behalf of the people. So then the next pasuk is the answer. Sforno on Chav Zayin, Zevach Pesachu. Zeh Zevach Nase b'shvil hapsicha shoysa asida le'asos b'chatzi halayla shel acharav. The nature of this offering is not just an offering for the holiday of Pesach. It's an offering about God passing over the houses of the Egyptians. And when would he pass over the houses of the Egyptians? He'd pass over the houses of the Egyptians Pesach night. But we don't bring korbanos at night. There's no such thing as a korban at night. Because korbanos are not brought at night. So it needs to be brought in like the pre-night period. So first of all, that's why it's brought the day before Pesach, because if you would bring it Pesach day, it's too late, it's after the fact, and there's no such thing as korbanos Pesach night. And that's also why it specifically is brought in the afternoon of Erev Pesach, because the korban is geared towards what will transpire the following evening. And there can't just be one korban on behalf of the nation. This was a miracle that happened for every single home among the Jewish people. This wasn't Lobetzibur, Lolitzibur was not some general miracle for the nation. This was a very personal miracle. So the nation, all the members of the nation experienced the same personal miracle. So it should be that everybody brings a korban. And that explains, but we also explained when we emphasize that it's because he saved our houses, it's personal. And because what happens about the passing over, that's why it's about night. And that's why the timing of the korban is when it is. It's a very interesting sforno. Okay, let's go on to verse 30. The plague of the firstborn occurs. Vayakam Paro Laila. Paro got up in the night. Who v'chol avadav v'chol Mitzrayim, he and all of his servants and all of Egypt. Vatahitza kagdolah Mitzrayim, and there was a great shout, a great cry in Egypt. Ki ein bayis asher in sham meis. There was not a house that was free from death. Okay, it's just an interesting technical question. Who exactly died in the plague of the firstborn? What's the definition of a firstborn? How did that work? And by the way, just if you take it super literally for a second, I mean, at least our halachic definition of a bechor is the first child in the family who is, and also that child is a boy. That's our halachic definition of a bechor. So if we're following the same definition, there should have been plenty of houses in Egypt that didn't have a dead person. Plenty of houses by that definition don't have a bechor. So what does this mean? There was no house that again, maybe the definition of bechor for these purposes is different. What does it mean there was no house that didn't have someone dead? Ramban and Pasuk Lamed, ki ein bayis asher ein sham meis. Loshon Rashi, haya sham bechor meis. So Rashi brings down a very interesting medrash. If there was a bechor on the premises, that bechor would die. Ein sham bechor. If there wouldn't be a bechor, gadol habayis meis. So the senior person of the household would die. So in every house, it's clearly based on this problem with the pasuk. In every house, somebody would die. Plan A was bechor, but there'd be a plan B as well. Shekori bechor, shenemar avani bechor et neyu. So you could have a loose language of bechor being like the most important person. Okay, davar acher, another pshat. Mitzrios mazanos tachas baleim v'yoldos mervakim pnuyim v'hayu lahem b'choros harbe pa'amim hem chamisha lisha achas cholechad b'chor la'aviv. So there's another pshat that the definition of a bechor, unlike how we define it, let's say for Pidyon Abein and the like, is the father's first child. So if you go with the assumption that the Medrash makes that there was a lot of sexual immorality in Egypt, you could have one woman who had 5 bechorim, because if she was with different men, each one, if it's the first child that man has, that's a bechor. So basically, statistically speaking, it worked out that thanks to the sexual immorality of the Egyptians, every house really had a bechor, if you define bechor as being the father's oldest child. So those are two possibilities. But the Ramban says the straightforward understanding here would be that the firstborns that died in Egypt were the firstborns from their mother's wombs. But Ramban says, look, I mean, the whole mitzvah of Pidyon Abein is supposed to be parallel in some way to what happened in the plague of the firstborn. And the mitzvah of Pidyon Abein has to do with the mother's first child. The first child to come out of the mother's womb. So it would be logical that was the definition here as well. Okay. Aval Adas Rabbi said in the Taretz, Shehika b'Mitzrayim kol b'choreim, klomar ha'av reishis ono, u'b'chor ha'eim peter rechem, v'gam gadol habayis. But the Ramban says the pshat could be that God got everybody. God got the first child of the father. God got the first child of the mother. If neither of those were relevant, whoever was the most prominent person in the house would die. V'lo ratza l'kadish tachtem b'Yisrael rak b'chor ha'em sheyadu meforsim yoser. B'behema lo yodoya klal rak b'chor ha'em u'bachar mikulam hamin hahu. Okay, so it's interesting. The Ramban says probably the way to really just make it all work out is that the definition of Bechor for the plague was more broad than the definition of Bechor for the mitzvah of Pidyon HaBein. So he says the one that's most clearly known, the one that's easiest to peg, is the mother's first child. He says, obviously, when it comes to animals, there's a mitzvah of firstborns by animals. That obviously is going to be the mother's first child. But so we have three possibilities here. Rashi says every house would have somebody die, whether Bechor, whether someone else. The other pshat brought down is the definition of Bechor is Bechor from the father, and there was so much sexual immorality in Egypt that every child had a firstborn from the father. And what the Ramban is really inclined to say is just the definition of Bechor for the plague was very broad. Firstborn of the mother, firstborn of the father, neither of the above, and the most prominent person in the household. Just an interesting question. Okay, let's go on to verse 31. So terrible thing for the Egyptians. The firstborns died, and now so Paro called to Moshe and Aaron in the night. Vayomer, and he said, Kumu tzu'u mitoch hami, get up and leave my nation. Gamatem gamrei Israel, you, the Jewish people, get out of here. U'lechu ivdu es Hashem kedaberchem, and go serve God as you have said you would. Okay, so let's just see a little bit here, technically, what exactly is going on. Let's see the Ramban in Lamed Aleph. Someone was asking me about this earlier in the week. Like, so where were Moshe and Aaron? Moshe and Aaron in Goshen? Were Moshe and Aaron sleeping by the palace? I mean, where were they? What does it mean he called to Moshe and Aaron? What was going on? Says the Ramban, Magid, Moshe Aaron Rashi. So Rashi, first of all, gives a remarkable picture to just think about. Paro was wandering around trying to find Moshe and Aaron. The chaos. All these people have just lost their firstborn. There must not be an inch in Egypt where there aren't people screaming. And Paro, the king of the town, of the country, is running around trying to find Moshe and Aaron. A remarkable picture. Moshe Aaron, Lanu b'Mitzrayim b'Layla, who says the Ramban, that night they slept in Egypt. L'kaim dvar she'omar v'yarducha lavadecha, Ela Elai v'ishtachavu li le'mor. He says to him, all of your servants are going to come and bow to me. So Moshe wanted to be on site because Moshe knew that this night was going to be a remarkable night. So he wanted to be there to make sure that what he said would come true. So then when Paro came to Moshe and he said, I want you out of here. So then Moshe sent messengers to the Jews in Goshen and says, Paro says it's time to go. V'nesvu kulam b'Ramses, and then they all gathered in Ramses. Vayayom gadol misham nasu b'yad Rama Moshe b'rosham. And by the time they actually left, it was daytime, and then they all left with Moshe at the helm. So just an interesting image to think about a little bit, and an interesting technical question as to where Moshe exactly was that night. We have the Sforno regarding the exchange between the child and the parent about the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. We have the Ramban discussing what firstborns they actually died, and we have also the Ramban discussing the encounter between Paro and Moshe after the plague of the firstborn.